Most of us, thankfully, have never seen war firsthand, but we have a sense of it thanks to photographers who risk their own lives becoming visual historians of some of the most horrendous sights a person can witness. What toll does such a career take, and why do they do it? Anthony Feinstein is a Peabody-winning documentary filmmaker and a professor of psychiatry at the University of Toronto. He explores such issues in his new book, Shooting War, 18 profiles of conflict photographers, and he joins us now for more. So nice to meet you.
Thank you.
And this book is just, well, I don't have to tell you, it is spectacular. It is a beautiful work of art in itself. But I want to get the Anthony Feinstein story on the record first before we look at some pictures. I want to take you back to 1982. You are conscripted, yes, into the South African Army?
Correct.
You're just out of med school. You are shipped off to northern Namibia and southern Angola. And I wonder how that experience influenced your interest in the effects of war and those whose job it is to document it.
Well, I was sent there as a doctor. For a period, I was a combat medic. I saw combat. I saw how men reacted to battle. I saw some remarkable reactions on their part, both good and bad. And I've never forgotten it. It was such a dramatic time. I did not want to be there. I was an unwilling conscript. I did not support the cause, but it was the law of the land, and they shipped me off, and I had to do it. And I haven't forgotten the way the men's responses to combat were so dramatic at times. It stayed with me, and I think, in part, it's one of the reasons why I've retained an interest in war and conflict, and now how it relates to journalism.
You helped produce a documentary 7 years ago or so on what it's like for war photographers in the battlefield. It's called Under Fire: Journalists in Combat. It features Finbar O'Reilly, who is a Reuters journalist who reached out to you for counseling. We're going to show a little snippet of it, and then we'll come back and chat, okay?
Sure.
If you would, please.
You mentioned, the awful business with Zhao in Afghanistan. Is that giving you pause for reflection and concern?
In some ways, yes. I mean, as I told you, when I came back from there, I was with Joao a couple of days before he stepped on the landmine and lost his legs.
Well, I've just arrived at the Musikela District Center in Helmand Province in southern Afghanistan. The staff sergeant who was in charge of the outpost that I was at on my last visit was shot through the chest, and one of the snipers who was there also stepped on the landmine.
For me, yeah, there was a certain point after a couple of times in Afghanistan where I was just feeling unmotivated, like, what's the point of this? Why am I doing this? And you not only feel disconnected, but you don't feel like there's a purpose to what you're doing. Previous generations didn't even acknowledge that this was really a problem. It was a very macho business, and it still is to some degree, but there's a greater understanding now, I think, by the institutions that they need to look out for their employees.
Do you think that's true, that last point, that news organizations now are more concerned about their employees out in the field?
Very much. I think the good news organizations recognize this as a major healthcare concern. I think there's a moral duty on their part to look after journalists. If you're going to send a journalist into a war zone or into an area of conflict, you have a moral responsibility to look after that person, not just physically, but also emotionally. And I think the good news organizations understand that now.
When you talk to these photographers, what kinds of coping skills do you give them that presumably at some point in their lives they will need in the field?
Well, all the photographers that I spoke to for this book are very experienced photographers. They've done it for a long time. They have worked out what needs to be done and what shouldn't be done. That said, I think some good common sense tips about psychological well-being can go a long way. How to look after yourself emotionally. But I do recognize that you can never make war safe. There's always going to be this element of danger and uncertainty. How do you navigate it successfully? That's the challenge.
As we consider war 100 years after the end of World War I, is it safer or is it more dangerous today to be a war photographer?
I think it's more dangerous because I think, once upon a time, journalists were looked at as impartial observers of conflict. Now it's not the case. Journalists are now in the crosshairs of insurgents.
They are targeted now, aren't they?
They are targeted. They are high-profile targets as well, not just for killing, but also for kidnap and ransom. And, you kidnap a journalist or you kidnap a big-name journalist and you get a lot of media attention. So I think it's much more dangerous for journalists now.
You have 18 profiles in this book, and there are clearly hundreds, if not thousands, of people who do this and do this well in the world. How do you make decisions about which 18 to profile?
Well, the group of war photographers is, I think, quite a tight, small group. I've been looking at journalists in combat zones for the past 19 years. And over this period, I've built up memories of great photographs that I've seen. And so this book is based on, let me start with a photograph. Let me pick a photograph that I find riveting and then go in search of the photographer and work backwards to find out about his life. What did he do to get this photograph? How has his profession treated him? How has he managed the challenges of war? But it all started with one photograph.
Well, I'm going to assume that you found this photograph remarkably riveting because it's on the cover of the book, after all.
Yes.
This is a shell-shocked Marine from the Tet Offensive in the Vietnam War. Why is this image considered so iconic in your view?
Well, it's a very famous photograph taken by Sir Don McCullen, who is one of the great war photographers. He's in his 80s now. He's had an unparalleled career doing war and conflict. And when you look at the image, this is in the aftermath of a very intense battle. And just by looking at the man's expression, you get a sense of what he's been through.
There is a vacancy in those eyes.
There's a vacancy in those eyes. It's quite haunting, and I think it speaks volumes.
What makes McCullen, I should call him Sir Don McCullen, such a unique war photographer in your view?
Well, number one, his great ability, his tremendous skill. But the other thing, which is very unusual, is his age. He's been doing it for such a long time. He's been doing it for decades. When you look at individuals or journalists who go into war zones, they do it when they're young for the most part. And as they start getting towards middle age, etc., they start maybe moving into something else. It's unusual to sustain a career in the front lines of conflict for such a long time.
Do you know what it is about him? Like, he was in Syria at the age of 77. He's in Iraq at the age of 79.
Yeah.
Why do that?
Well, I can speak for a long time about the biology of risk and why people do this. But clearly, you've got to have a certain biological temperament that allows you to do this work year after year, decade after decade. Usually what happens is you get to your 40s and 50s, the neurotransmitters that drive risky behavior start declining. As we age, things change. But for some people who are like statistical outliers, those things don't necessarily change. They have this ability to sustain this kind of intense activity associated with extraordinary risk well into middle and late life. And he's done that and remained very creative.
Now, he took this picture of the soldier in Vietnam. It's a half a century ago already.
Yes.
What is his view of this picture today?
Well, he's slightly irritated by it because he says it's become like an art photograph. And I think that's what irritates him. So, I'm sure he recognizes it as a great photograph, but in some ways he pushes back against the iconic status of it. He says, people buy it as decoration almost, which is something that I think he resents. So I think he had no notion at the time, of course, when he took it, that it would turn out to be such a remarkable photograph. So I suspect, having met him and interviewed him, I think he's somewhat ambivalent about this particular photograph.
So he would, if I read you right, his concern is that it is no longer evoking the kind of horror that he intended at the time. It's become more of an art piece, that kind of thing?
For some people, yes. And I think that's where the objection lies, yes.
Does he feel any guilt about that?
Well, he feels a lot of guilt about his career in general. He speaks about, living off the suffering of others, that I've built, this remarkable career, basically photographing the misery and distress of other people. I think that's misplaced guilt, personally, but, I can't tell him what to feel.
Right.
But, he speaks about this theme repeatedly, the guilt that he feels at how he views that almost profiting of the suffering of other people.
Profiting, but we need people to chronicle these moments in our history.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
He's ambivalent about that.
And I think he's a remarkable chronicler of that.
Indeed he is. But he keeps going back, and I think, and obviously that is the case for many of them who continue to go back and continue to go back. And look, you're the psychiatrist, so you tell me. I'll play amateur psychiatrist. Is there, kind of some obsession or some addiction to the rush you get when you're in the field and you're taking your own life into your hands, trying to be the chronicler of the world?
Yeah. I do hesitate to use the words addiction, although I know where you're coming from, because I think, addiction kind of pathologizes something, and I don't see this as pathology at all. At the same time, there's no doubt that the drama and the excitement and the magnitude of these events can be so compelling that they keep on sucking you back in. So when you're kind of witnessing extraordinary events, And they speak about this all the time, having an armchair as history unfolds in front of you, that's certainly a very compelling reason to return. But I do think you've got to have a certain biology that allows you to do this.
Indeed. Let us, I want to cycle through some pictures now so people get a sense about what's in the book here. And let's bring up, can we, this first one here. This is by Tim Hetherington. Now, Tim Hetherington, he was killed right at the age of 40. Tim was killed while covering the Libyan War.
Yes.
And this is one of his most powerful photographs. It was 4 years before his death. This is an American soldier in Afghanistan. What did studying his life teach you about the human condition?
Well, number one, he's a remarkable photographer. He didn't regard himself as a war photographer. He saw himself as a storyteller.
That's him.
He
there.
wanted to tell people stories, which I think he did very effectively with photographs and with text. Obviously, the ending here is a very tragic one. He had had a lot of combat experience with another journalist, Sebastian Junger. After their time in Afghanistan, they had spoken about not going back into conflict zones. And yet Hetherington went back to Libya. So you have this pull of war. It's almost like the siren call of conflict that just entices people back in. And I was told that when he went to Libya, he did not want to film conflict, but he wanted to do a series of portraits of fighters. In other words, stay back from the front lines and do the portraits. But once there, he kind of got sucked into the vortex.
How did he die?
Well, I think, there was a mortar attack and a bit of shrapnel, and it basically perforated the femoral artery in his leg, and he bled to death.
He bled out.
And, with good health care or, good medical care at the scene, perhaps he might have been saved.
Might have saved him.
Yeah.
This next picture we're going to show is, well, I remember this one very, very well. This is Oklahoma City, the bombing, the terrorist bombing.
Yes.
Chuck Porter, amateur photographer. He won a Pulitzer Prize for this picture. This was the bombing that took place at the Murrah building. This was during Bill Clinton's time as President of the United States.
Yeah.
How did this picture change Chuck Porter's life?
Well, it's a fascinating story. I mean, Chuck Porter was a banker. He was sitting in a bank where he heard this tremendous boom, and he thought, well, this is a gas explosion. And then he looked out the window of his bank, and he saw bits of paper floating down. And he thought, no, this is unusual. And, there's a marvelous quote by Pasteur that, chance favors the prepared mind. He was an amateur photographer who always kept his camera with him. So he ran out his bank, and it turned out that he was almost the first on the scene of this ghastly terrorist attack in which this federal building had basically been destroyed, like someone had taken an ice cream scoop and had just removed the front of the building. And he was there with his camera well before first responders, well before any other journalists, and he started to take photographs. And he basically circled the building, photographing and photographing, getting a remarkable series of images. This was not in the digital photograph era. So, later that day, he went off to Walmart, of all places, and he handed in this film and said, develop it. He had no notion, really, of what he had photographed. And then someone said to him, oh, you've got some incredible photographs here. And on the way home, he dropped them off at, and I think it was Associated Press or one of these news outlets, and he had this iconic photograph of this terrorist attack. Now,
that photo obviously changed his life in many regards, but he seems, from what I've heard, he seems to have a kind of, reintegrated himself, if that's the right word, back into sort of normal life.
Yes.
How well does that go for the majority of them who decide to get out before they get injured or, God forbid, killed, and they try to leave that behind and kind of pick up a more normal life?
Well, I think it can be a challenge to reintegrate back into civil society. I mean, you leave behind the excitement and the drama and all the history of it, and you have to get back to life, which, to begin with, can seem quite mundane. Worrying about, paying bills and the traffic and the washing machine breaking down and the car needing a service. These kind of things are considered, very mundane and perhaps quite irritating. But it's obviously essential that you make this good transition back to your life back home because, you have your partner, you have your family, and if you can't make that transition, life can be very difficult for you.
Let's bring up the next picture here. This is from Haiti. A woman in heels walking through the rubble, holding the hand of her partner. This was taken by Carole Guzzi. What's the significance of this picture for you?
Well, number one, again, Carole Guzzi is a remarkable photographer. I mean, she's won 4 Pulitzer Prizes, which is just says a lot about her. But it's not about the Pulitzers, it's also about who she is as a person and the kind of photographs that she takes. She's a very empathic woman. She initially trained as a nurse before she became a photographer. Her photographs are imbued with a lot of empathy. She spends a long time working on a project, months and months, getting a feel of her subjects and of the topic. And there's a great humanity to her work. She captures the pain and the suffering and the resilience of her subjects in a remarkable way. So she brings a great sensitivity to what she does. She said to me that one of the downsides of having all this empathy is that you personally, she herself, can feel a lot of this pain. It can be very emotionally challenging for her to work in this environment because she's so empathic.
She got PTSD, did she not?
She did, and she speaks quite openly about this.
What's the difference between PTSD and moral injury?
Well, PTSD is a mental illness, and you develop that in response to confronting an overwhelming stressor, a life-threatening event. And then you have particular kinds of symptoms that are very clearly defined. The re-experiencing symptoms, dreams, nightmares, flashbacks. The avoidance symptoms, wanting to stay away from recollections, trying to push away memories of trauma. The hypervigilance and autonomic hyperarousal. So you come back to a safe city like Toronto, but you feel under threat. You're scanning your environment because you don't feel safe. You have your irritability, you can't fall asleep at night, etc. So that's a mental illness. Moral injury is not a mental illness. Moral injury is a sense that somehow you've lost your way morally in terms of what you've done. And it's associated with strong feelings of guilt and shame in particular. It might be the gateway down the road to PTSD, but by itself is not a mental illness.
I see. And would the rates how do the rates of PTSD in this particular cohort compare to the general population?
Well, if you go and take a snapshot of journalists at any one point in time, you're not going to find a profession that's full of PTSD. You don't. But if you look at the cumulative effect, these are individuals who've gone back to war for 2, 3, 4 decades, and over the lifespan of this career, that's when you start seeing the rates of PTSD going up relative to the general population.
How about anxiety or depression?
Likewise, I think, when you're putting yourself into these really difficult environments, it can potentially have psychological consequences. That said, this is a very resilient group of people.
Okay, we've got a couple of minutes left, which is enough time, I think, to show one more picture. This holds special significance to you, this picture, because I'm told this one hangs in your office.
It does.
Why this picture?
Well, it's taken by this remarkable photographer, Alexandra Boulard. She's no longer alive. She didn't die from combat-related problems, but she died young.
Aneurysm or something.
She had an aneurysm while in the West Bank in Ramallah, and by the time she made it to medical care, it was too late. I think it's a remarkable photograph because at first glance, you see these two young women, they're smiling.
Let's bring it back up if we can.
They're holding a flower. It looks like a happy photograph, but then you focus on the background and you see homes burning. And the homes burning reflect the ethnic cleansing of civil war. So they are Kosovo Albanians. There's a conflict with the Serbs. This is ethnic cleansing which has returned to Europe 40, 50 years after the Second World War. Who thought it would come back? That kind of behavior. It has come back. And I think, in the subtleties of this photograph, you see the utter misery of civil war. Villages that are destroyed, people who lose their homes. 1 minute it's the Serbs, 6 months later it's the Kosovo Albanians. It goes back and forth. Deep ethnic hatred, which really hasn't lifted. And I think this picture captures it with a great subtlety.
Indeed. I can't thank you enough for coming in and sharing your thoughts and your pictures with us. Shooting War, 18 profiles of conflict photographers. That's it right there, with that iconic picture that the photographer is so ambivalent about, but which captures, boy, does that not capture the battlefield right there in so many ways. Anthony Feinstein, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.